We have much more on the breaking news. The IDF and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu emphasizing their mission is not complete in spite of the death of top Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar. Joining me now is IDF International spokesperson Major Doron Spielman. Major, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, understandably, and President Biden just said this in a statement, that he compares the relief that the people of Israel must feel to what the United States felt after Osama bin Laden was killed. Having said that, can you give us any details about the operation that took down the mastermind behind October 7th?
Absolutely. Chris, thank you for having me. And I think what President Biden said reaches to the very heart of the Israeli people. Again, Israel's a small country of 10 million people. Yahya Sinwar planned and perpetrated an attack that left 1,200 people, men, women, and children, dead. They were butchered. 250 were brought back to Gaza. 101 still remain there. There's not an Israeli family in this entire country that does not either have a family member that was affected or know of a close family member that was affected directly by this. And there is two emotions. One, as you mentioned, is a sense of relief and joy that such a mastermind of terror has reached justice. And at the same time, we know that we still have 101 hostages left and are facing a war on 7 fronts. As to how this went down, the Israeli IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, have been working with really sound intelligence over the last few weeks in terms of cornering Hamas chief terrorists that are in Gaza Strip and the Rafah area, eliminating their areas of movement and restricting the zones in which they can operate in. We knew that Yahya Sinwar was somewhere in the area along with other terror commanders, and we were hoping to force him to act like he was having to run from place to place like a fugitive. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. He was moving from tunnels to buildings back and forth, and we were hoping he would make a mistake. He made it earlier today. He and 2 other terrorists opened fire on Israeli troops. Israeli troops returned fire also with a tank mortar shell. The mortar shell hit the building, killing Yahya Sinwar and 2 other terrorists. After a period of time that we had to scope out the area, make sure there were no other terrorists, no other tunnels, that this was not a booby trap, this was not an ambush, our forces moved in to search the building and identified a body within the rubble that resembled Yahya Sinwar. It was in a setting that was very difficult to reach. We managed to remove DNA, send it for DNA evidence and dental records, and it was confirmed that, in fact, one of the world's greatest terror minds, in a sense of evil for the world, was in fact killed today.
He was the most wanted terrorist. Was it very clear, or at least as clear as you can be from a visual identification from the IDF who were there, that this was indeed Yahya Sinwar?
Yes, the troops on the ground were surprised. When they moved in, they identified 3 bodies, and right away when they actually saw Yahya Sinwar and they saw the resemblance that he had, they immediately alerted the intelligence authorities that they thought maybe this was him. Again, we have to be very, very careful. He's been out of sight for more than a year. Again, we have to remember the situation here. We haven't seen Yahya Sinwar in a year. He's been underground in tunnels. The only thing we have is a video that was taken from inside a tunnel, looking at him walking by. So his appearance slightly changed. While the people of Gaza have been suffering and have been moving, 2 million of them from place to place, he has been underneath the ground. And so it took time to match that picture with the DNA evidence, but we held our breath, and we hope, as the president said, as Kamala Harris said, as leaders around the world are saying, that this can usher in a new era, an era that is going to be good for Israelis, good for the people of Gaza, and good for the world as a whole.
There is no doubt the challenge that faced the IDF in the 377 days since that attack. As you rightly pointed out, he was in tunnels that are very difficult to penetrate, to navigate. He knows Gaza, knew Gaza extraordinarily well. There was no digital footprint. We know he wasn't using any digital technology. So when you say there was surprise, there was no expectation that, first of all, he would be there. And had you been able to in any way, even with no degree of certainty, but some suspicion that he was indeed moving between tunnels and buildings?
we did have reports that he was on the run, that he was a fugitive. Again, our actions were, if we couldn't identify him specifically, as you said, because of the challenge, he's not using phones, he's certainly not using pagers or any electronic device. He's only moving with a small number of people. Almost no one knows where he was. Our strategy then said, okay, how can we use this in order to catch him? The only way to do it is to reduce an area of movement to a place that amongst terrorists, hopefully one of them is Yahya Sinwar, who will be forced to move so much from place to place that he's bound to make a mistake. That is exactly what happened. They fired on Israeli troops, alerting Israeli troops of the presence, which enabled us to return fire and kill him. It was Yahya Sinwar's last mistake. So while we didn't know that he was in that building, we knew he was in the area, and we hoped in every terror attack, when you identify the bodies, that you get to the Hitler, so to speak, of Gaza, or the bin Laden of Gaza. And today we received the news that he was there, along with two other people that had been by his side since the beginning.
I have a couple of questions about the aftermath. We just heard from President Biden via National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. The two of them are on Air Force One en route to Germany. And he said this is the day after in Gaza. Again, very much familiar to those who listen to Prime Minister Netanyahu. He said where Hamas is no longer in power or control. Is that your understanding, that anyone who is left in the leadership of Hamas is now outside of Gaza?
Look, the IDF has managed to take out most of Hamas's terror force. We have taken out now Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed Diaf is number 2, Ismail Haniya in Beirut, which was the previous leader, along with, of course, Hassan Nasrallah. And every one of these Hamas commanders or anyone who will replace them knows that the IDF is going to reach them. There is a major shakedown in their leadership. To say at this point that Hamas is no longer functional, I hope that's the case, but certainly not something we can act on. We have to make sure, Chris, that the Hamas ideology is also taken care of, that anyone who might represent that ideology, who took place in the October 7th attack, is also eliminated so that a new generation can rise. Maybe this is the opportunity. Of course, I hope it is. Although we still have two major goals regarding the day after. The first is to bring home our hostages, 101 of which are in Gaza. And the second is Israel's facing a war right now on 7 fronts. The mastermind of evil that stands behind this war is Iran. We have caused damage to Iranian proxies. We have said that we will, in fact, return the gift that Iran sent us with the 181 ballistic missiles. Of course, I'm being facetious, that they sent toward us, and that there will be an Israeli response. We have got to take care of right now the Iranian threat and the 7 fronts of war. And maybe those around the area will look. We'll see the fate of these terrorists, how they reach justice, and we'll try to take a new path, a path that is good for Israel, good for the West, and good for the other people of the Middle East.
Major, I just spoke to the family of Israeli-American hostage Omer Nutra, who said that Sinwar's death makes this more dangerous for their son. In fact, the way they said it was, it puts our family at greater risk. Do you agree with that? How does this change or impact in any way strategy?
First of all, my heart goes out to that family and the other 101 hostage families. What they are living through is a roller coaster of hell. It's been going on now for over 370 days. The relatives are in dungeons underneath the ground, being held by Hamas in horrific conditions. And it's something that none of us even want to imagine. And they have had ups and downs and hopes crushed. And they know that the IDF is out to try to protect them. What I can tell you is this: Yahya Sinwar was the mastermind that took those people hostage. He ripped them from their homes and trained people to rip them from their homes. He held them as a bargaining chip. He was completely against any type of deal that would allow them to go back home. And as we've heard from Prime Minister Netanyahu and the president and the vice president, we hope, with him out of the way, that this will encourage a change within Hamas. And this is the only action. This is the only answer we know. There's no way to predict what it is, because your enemy has a vote that will enable our hostages to come home safely. There's a chance. We need to do everything we can to make sure that happens.
Major Doron Spellman, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Chris, for having me. I appreciate it.